Okay, this is the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Outlook, lasting from Friday, June the 19th until Sunday, June the 21st. So this week we've had quite a heat wave over us with high pressures, and we talked about some duality of high pressure from the Atlantic and also in the Appalachian Mountains. Now this high pressure in the Appalachians has started to erode, so we're starting to see some of this moisture funnel down into the southeast as a result. We have a boundary to our north, which is slightly nudging to the south. We're starting to see some showers, overnight activities along southeast North Carolina, but I think as the sun comes up and the day heats and land heats, most of this moisture will dissipate and we'll get right back into our sort of a heat dome that we have over the southeast region. Some of this inland troughing should be able to fire off some thunderstorms, so we're looking at probably a modest to possibly moderate sea breeze today, maybe a little bit more widespread moderate winds to southeast North Carolina, maybe a little more modest along South Carolina, and perhaps a little bit stronger to North Carolina. Now the third high that has developed started yesterday morning is this one right here, the earth.nullschool.net map. We can see Bill still wrapping winds into a closed circulation, and if we go up to the 500 HPA range, which is what the Earth Null School map uses, we can definitely see that it probably is going to get caught up in this jet stream up high. So it's general west to east flow. It's already seeing shearing at the higher levels, and as we go a little bit higher in the atmosphere, we should be able to see that jet increase, and that will be able to steer Bill from the west to the east, probably rip whatever's left of Bill apart in the process, and then throw everything out over to the Atlantic. So going back to the surface at the southeast, we see this Atlantic high pressure spinning clockwise, providing the southerly flow up the coast. We do see this northeast Gulf of Mexico high that has developed, and we do see what is left or what is eroding of this high pressure in the Appalachian. It could build back another time, but for right now it is weaker. We're just seeing a general northwesterly flow kind of spilling down off the mountains, down sloping towards the coast, and then getting caught up in the southerly flow. So I think that this Atlantic high pressure will become the more dominant feature of the threes, and we should see a general south-southwest to southwest flow for South Carolina. Okay, so now looking at the infrared loop, we can see a lot of this clouding. I think there's a little bit of a frontal boundary or a segment of a boundary that has drifted somewhere along southeast North Carolina to the Cape Fear area. However, a lot of these clouds, some rains and storms that are associated with this boundary, are starting to sort of dissipate as we get towards the sunrise, which should be pretty soon. It's about 5 o'clock a.m. now, and I'm thinking that most of this activity that's ongoing should dry out as the sun comes up and the land heats. So if we look at the water vapor loop, we can definitely see some of this area dissipating where it sort of flared up overnight. As the land cooled, it was allowed to sort of build down into the southeast region, and then now we're going to see that dry out as the day goes on. Okay, so looking at the overall map, we see the remnants of Bill here. We see this frontal boundary sort of dragged up to the northeast, and we see this general west to east flow from the jet stream, and you can see the shearing up high of what the remnants of Bill. So we're going to see most of this activity just sort of stream off to the east. As you can see in the southeast, this drier air pocket is going to build back in as the sun comes up. There is an area of disturbance that the National Hurricane Center is looking at right down here in the Caribbean. I think some gale warnings were just recently issued, and one thing we always got to start watching for this time of the year is the Saharan air layer. Now the Saharan air layer is, let's see if I can find it, this is the NHC, where the east-northeast winds, northeast to east-northeast winds are about 30 to 35 knots just north of Venezuela, Colombia area. And when we start looking at the Saharan air layer, this is the west coast of Africa. Low-level jetting across the deserts of Africa spin up a lot of this dust, this desert dust, and it sits at about the mid-levels, and it travels across the Atlantic and sort of precipitates down along the western sides over the Caribbean. And as you can see towards the end of the week, we've seen a build. Let me go back over to the most recent one. We can see a little bit more of a moderate precipitation of the Saharan dust down over the Caribbean. So that's why I don't think many tropical waves in this area are going to be successful, because there's a little bit of this drier, more stable air that is mixing in with the cloud tops. So definitely see some storms and convection, maybe some gale force winds. However, probably won't be enough to get any kind of tropical activity going until it gets further away from this area of Saharan air. Okay, so getting back over to Charleston, South Carolina, looking at the local sensor, looking at Isle of Palms Pier, we see 12 knots early this morning. This should fade as the sun comes up and land heats and the sea breeze process starts all over again. We did have a healthy build, a nocturnal build last night, and that's based off of what we call an inversion. Now, an inversion is when you have warm air aloft left over from the daytime that flips in the atmosphere as the land cools, so that warmer air actually comes back down to the surface and does sort of a reverse circulation from the same direction. So we did show some moderate numbers, probably a little bit more in the harbor. Let's take a look there. And yes, we do have up to 20 knots on some of those gusts. So we had a healthy inversion, which sometimes can be an indication of what our sea breezes are going to look like for the day. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something very similar to this throughout the day today, unless we get some additional thunderstorm activity inland to build the sea breezes. So if we go back to the surface map, I'm counting on this Atlantic high pressure as a recap for today and for the extended forecast. This Atlantic high pressure should build a little bit back more to the north by Sunday to give us a peak day in the extended period. Should be the dominant feature, with this northeast Gulf of Mexico high running in tandem. This Appalachian high may jog back and forth up and down the mountain chain to provide that somewhat of a northwesterly flow in the morning. So you may see some of that. Definitely some westerly flow from the northeast Gulf of Mexico high, and the southerly flow during the daytime coming back in. And so for the extended period for Chucktown, for the Chucktown wind report, we'll say 10 to 14 knots today, with some potential for higher builds as long as we have some inland and Piedmont troughing, thunderstorming. Maybe some of the lee side troughing spilling down the mountainside and downsloping towards the coast could help some of that as well. We'll say for Saturday, we'll have a very similar day to today. A little bit, perhaps a later build, a little bit higher to 13 to 17 knots for the evening. And then for Sunday, I'm expecting this high pressure to pretty much erode to almost nothing, and then we will have a very dominant, very robust Bermuda high offshore, and that should be able to give us a very healthy, maybe 14 to 18 knot southerly sea breeze for Sunday. So we're looking at Sunday being the peak day unless things change. So that will be it for the extended forecast for the Chucktown wind report. Have a good weekend.